Welcome. My name is Michael Howard. I've been in the industry for quite a while. Been following SDN and NFE and VNFs in particular now for 5 or 6 years. Actually, I think 2009 we started hearing about SDN, and it started, and then the NFE white paper set things in a different direction or added another dimension to the SDN and NFE trend. And so we have this conference today to focus on what's happening with VNFs. There's a lot of aspects to it. And we have some very fine speakers. We have a great program today. All the chairs are not filled yet. However, let me say that some of the best conferences I've ever been to were smaller, and it really fosters more participation with the audience. And in those, I remember 2 in particular, one in South Africa, one in Europe, where it was amazing how much we all learned because more people participated. So that's the advantage of not having the room filled yet. So when we get to Q&A times, don't be afraid. I'm sure you won't. I see a lot of people, industry veterans in the room, that are not afraid to speak up. So with that, let me get started. So IHS, who are we? Many of you know me from Infonetics Research. 3 years ago, IHS Markit acquired Infonetics Research. Infonetics Research was 50 people, had a good presence in the industry, and now we're part of a 14,000 person company that is all focused on trying to provide the research that everybody needs for whatever the topic is, and a $3.3 billion corporation. So we serve a lot of companies on the bigger company basis, a lot of industries, aerospace, defense, automotive. We own Jane's Planes and Carfax, for example, chemical engineer, energy, most of any company involved in oil and other energies probably are our customers. So extensive breadth and depth across automotive, displays, enterprise and IT, and mobile and telecom, which we're part of, media and advertising. So healthcare really goes across the spectrum of eventually the hopes of the company are all industries. So we do webinars, probably many of you have either attended or participated or at least not aware of. And our webinar program really, what we try to aim at is have thought leadership, and that's what I've been involved with a lot. Our senior analysts are involved in thought leadership in the industry. Our webinars also bring brand awareness and, of course, generate leads. A lot of times it's the sales and marketing people that sponsor our webinars. It's a managed process. We're old pros at it for sure. So today's agenda, after my opening remark here, I'm going to give a talk to set the scene, really. And then we're going to have Josh Goodell from AT&T and Christos Kolias from Orange talk about how they're actually delivering services based on VNFs. And then we'll have a roundtable discussion, including Paul Brittain from Metaswitch, about cloud-native VNFs. Cloud-native, what is it? And where is it? And are we there yet? Or when will we be there? Then we'll have VNFs as business services, and I'll be chairing that one. We'll have a lunch, 45 minutes. Then this afternoon we have a great session on next-gen voice, on security, and on mobile. I'll make a few closing remarks, and my colleague Mike Sullivan, trainer, will also make a couple of remarks at that point. Then we have our cocktail party and be part of the exhibitions. Okay, so visit our sponsors, Metaswitch, Versa, Palo Alto in the room next door. So also, we're going to have a survey, final presentations. Your feedback is important to us. This is our first event of this event, and we have a great program, and we'll see how the surveys come back. Once you fill out that survey, you have access to all the presentations, the usual. Okay, so Wi-Fi, Hyatt_meeting, take a quick look. The password is IHS 0919, 0919, so IHS 0919 and Hyatt_meeting. And there's a conference app you can get to as well. Okay. Social media, it's fine to tweet during the conference. Use the hashtag VNF World 17, and then follow IHS at IHS for Tech for market updates and announcements. That's social media. So now we'll get, any questions about so far? So every year this is the 5th year that we've done a global survey of operators, and the operators in this year's 5th annual survey on SDN and NFV control 61% of the world's telecom capex, very significant statistically. Across all the major regions, all sorts of types of operators, incumbents. And what we found was 100% of them are planning or doing SDN now. The same for NFV, planning or doing SDN and NFV. So this is a VNF conference, so what kind of VNFs are operators planning to deploy? So here's a list. The list is probably longer, but this is what we put out in the survey. We based the list originally on the NFV white paper. Had a list of use cases, but we've added a few more. So we see here the top use case, 100% of the operators are planning to deploy or already are. We have 2 in the room that are already deploying business virtual enterprise CPE. The virtual PE router, provider edge router, a lot of people. In fact, that's a piece of a lot of the virtual enterprise CPE use cases. And not every operator that we talked to had mobile services. So you can think of several big guys that don't have mobile services. So we had them in our survey. So we see IMS core is not 100%, but almost every mobile operator that has mobile operations is planning to deploy VNFs for the IMS core or the mobile core, EPC, etc. The VNPAAS is the virtual network platform as a service. I think of it as the way to deploy network slicing. And you can go down the list. Interestingly, this year, here's 2/3 of the operator planning to have what I think VNPAAS, or slicing for IoT, mobile base station, the GI LAN. So wherever you look, whatever part of the network operators are planning to deploy, to use NFV and VNFs in particular. So network automation with SDN and NFV. I've been using this for several years, but it's still, I find, useful. So the big picture of what operators want to get to with SDN and NFV is automation, really, and a control over the whole network. So at the top, we see applications like IoT or bandwidth on demand or intent-based applications asking the network for some services. And there's some kind of, eventually, there's a central control of the whole network, an orchestrator of orchestrators, I call it. And it knows about services. It knows about how to translate those services into the network. And so at that top level, there's a holistic global view of the network, end-to-end view. So today, we're not quite there. So what's happening with operators is the next level down are the domain orchestrators and controllers. And those domain orchestrators are like for mobile backhaul or the mobile core, IMS, different domains of the network, or SD-WAN and the virtual CPE. And so the big picture, to get to the big picture, we have this logically centralized orchestrator of orchestrators, which today is, many people are, the junior version of this, the early version of this is multi-domain orchestration. So eventually multi-domain, the view of operators is eventually that covers the whole network. We have service models there, device models there. But how do you get automation? You have to, at the bottom level, the real network, the servers, and the network equipment, from that extract, do telemetry, extract data about subscriber behavior and also about the network flows themselves. And then you do real-time analytics on that. I call that small data. You have to have immediate feedback. Then you feed that back into a bigger pool of data, big data. That gets fed into OSS, BSS, policy input back into the orchestrator of orchestrators. So this is a view in the future. Over at the left-hand side, I have security. Security is complicated. It's everywhere, and Jeff Wilson's going to drive a conversation this afternoon, a panel on that. But the whole idea is automation. Get to automation. You can't do on-demand services without automation. Okay, so today we're going to talk about just particular domains, contained domains. So we're going to talk about enterprise services, orchestration and control. So that's one piece. And we're going to talk about the virtual CPE use cases like SD-WAN, firewall, WAN optimization control, the security, etc. So that's one. Well, there's really three more areas I was going to point to. One is IMS and mobile core, and another is security on the left-hand side. And so we're going to talk about each of these later today. And then the mobile network, the RAN, etc. Okay, the top SDN use cases for revenue. Operators told us, we asked them, what are the top use cases based on SDN and NFV that will provide new revenue? So what we found was, and this is again the big 5th annual survey this year, where 61% of the world's CapEx was represented, we found 79% of them said SD-WAN is one of those SDN NFV based services. 73% said the virtual CPE managed services. So these are, for new revenue, what are the drivers? And there's a lot more. Bandwidth on demand, data center interconnection, multi-cloud. So a number of these use cases. If we look at just what the enterprise revenue drivers are, I've highlighted them in red. So operators are definitely looking at SD-WAN, the virtual CPE managed services, bandwidth on demand. I think Josh might talk about that. Virtual or hybrid public cloud, bandwidth calendaring. So a lot of the services are aimed at enterprises and, of course, attracting revenue. So SD-WAN in particular, why? It's a growing market, but enterprises a few years ago were motivated by, let's have an alternate, cheaper connection to WANs, maybe with a broadband carrier, so that we're paying less than our IP MPLS connection with the major operators. But what has happened is it's grown into more of enterprises learning and operators learning that you can deliver a lot of services, not just SD-WAN, you can deliver a lot of services using NFV and SDN. So we'll talk more about that today. And then where do operators plan to execute their VNFs? Well, two new places are smart COs and on UCPE. So what we found in this same study is where you're going to execute the VNFs. So we found that in data centers not near a CO, like a central data center, 70% of the operators are planning to execute VNFs there. In data centers closer to COs, 85% of operators said they're going to execute their VNFs there, run their VNFs. 97% of operators plan the VNF execution in a smart CO. And this is where the CHORD initiative applies. That AT&T initiated, but a lot of other operators are trying to, in a coordinated way, build templates for hardware, templates for software for that data center, that mini data center that resides in COs. But also 82% of the operators said, oh, UCPE, we're going to execute VNFs on universal CPE or small boxes, could have NID properties in them or not, at the customer prem. And certainly the telecom operators and MSOs, cable operators, are planning to put that capability on CPE in homes. So the VNF software goes there at the CO, UCPE hardware and VNF software go at the premises. So in a different study at the end of last year, we asked operators, well, what about CHORD? What about the CO re-architected as a data center? And we found that, and we published this in December, 30% said they're planning to deploy CHORD this year somewhere in their network. 40% said later. So even at the early development level of the CORD initiative, a lot of carriers are attracted by it and are planning it. A number of the operators that I spoke to in this survey said, we're going to do CHORD or CHORD-like. So when you think of CHORD, it's a template of hardware, a template of software for mobile, for enterprise, for residential, and it's a good model. And a lot of operators say we'll use most of the model, but we might tweak and replace some of the pieces that are in the actual CHORD description with go our own way. So what about universal CPE, the physical UCPE for the virtual CPE use case? This is a lot of text, but let me just say that this is essentially a box. It has a server in it. It has what I call a Pico cloud. It has a server storage switch inside of the box. And both Orange and AT&T and many other operators have some small deployments or larger deployments using this model. And we're going to discuss this plenty more today. There's two basic types of the equipment that we see. One is that the NID, or the network interface device, the customer CPE that connects the operator with demarcation functions, and it will have that process, that Pico cloud. Or it's a box that doesn't have the NID functions, doesn't have the demarcation functions. So we've looked at this, and we think there will be something like 20,000 units worldwide shipped this year. We did this earlier this year. We'll see if everybody's on track. Maybe we'll ask operators in the room how extensive the UCPE deployments are so far. But basically, it's a new type of box that looks like, if it's a NID, it's a NID with added function. If it's a new box, sometimes it's an SD-WAN box, has SD-WAN capabilities and VNF capabilities, or the SD-WAN as a VNF. So we think it's probably 750 million or so accumulated between 2016 and 2020. Okay, conclusions. There's no doubt that operators are deploying SDN and NFV. The VNFs in smart COs and UCPE, new places for execution of the VNFs. 97% of the operators said they're going to deploy VNFs in COs, and 70% planned CHORD deployments. We saw that 100% are leveraging the development and deployments of NFV for the virtual enterprise CPE use case. That is to deploy virtualized firewalls, other security, WAN optimization control, VPNs, etc. And importantly, for revenue producing, SD-WAN was the top of the list. 79% of the operators said they're going to deploy SD-WAN based on SDN and NFV for revenue. And then the UCPE market, tens of thousands of units in the next couple of years worldwide. And with that, I have a minute or two. Questions or counter opinions? We accept discussion here. Any questions? Yes, Michaela.
Hey, I wanted to ask, so when the old virtual CPE was, started to raise all good about that. Coming from a voice perspective, when do you see the voice starting to be attached to the same virtual CPE or universal CPE?
So the question is, when do we see voice in the UCPE, that is the box sitting at a customer prem, when do we see, for example, an SBC VNF? Or
applications or even PBX type of application?
Very good question, and I'm going to defer the answer to Diane's session here a little later today.
I'm going to be with her.
I know.
That's more from a core perspective. I just figured that I've been talking to all the manufacturers in terms of the universal CPE, and they all come from a data perspective. And when we start talking about voice, it's sort of like they're still two worlds apart.
Yeah, I'll answer that.
Do we have a mic? Yeah, sure.
It's for the recording, so don't run. I'm sorry.
So Michaela, I actually agree with you. I was with a large operator last week who was just rolling out a virtual CPE, but more for the data side, right, for SD-WAN. And I asked them that same question, right, when is the SBC or voice gateway or anything on the roadmap? I'm like, it's not a top 5 priority. So I think it's a much longer, the long tail piece of that. So I think your assessment is probably what I'm hearing too, that the first pieces are all in the data and probably security, firewall.
Right, if you look at the top, so if you look at the top applications that operators are aiming at the virtual CPE, it's not the voice at the top. There's firewall, because what they're aiming at is at all these branch offices, there's a firewall, there's a VPN box, there's sometimes a separate IDS, IPS box. So it's getting rid of all those boxes and being able to just deliver functions quickly as software on one box. So voice, I haven't seen as a big priority for that application. Josh.
So I've been working on this, AT&T, so we've been working on this for some time. I will tell you, voice is a priority. It's not that it's not a priority. So it's just not an easy one to solve for, and I don't think it's completely binary either. One of the challenges is TDM interfaces. And on those boxes, really it's all about driving cost down and performance up. And when you have to add things like TDM interfaces, that adds a lot of cost. So the trick is going to be, how do you do this in an elegant, low-cost manner? And I think it's going to be different for over-the-top voice type solutions. You may be able to do more with an over-the-top voice solution than one that is not. So we're actively wrestling with this, by the way. I think it's necessary. I mean, voice is a hugely important application. And to your point, you don't want to have multiple boxes out there. Ideally, you're consolidating those boxes. So I don't think it's not a priority. It's very expensive and very difficult to solve for. And there are certain voice applications we have already solved for, but they're the more traditional over-the-top solutions.
Thank you.
Great. And with that, I think I used my time. So, great. Well, thank you.